Today I want to talk about something that you need to understand if you want to shift your reality. Specifically, I'm going to explain the process through which your reality is created, and so show you how you have the power to change it. And I don't just mean through working really hard or trying to manipulate your external circumstances, because actually when you understand how this process works, you realise that your true power lies within. My name's Georgia. I have a master's degree in consciousness, spirituality and transpersonal psychology, and in my free time I love to research manifestation and the science behind shifting our reality. So let's get straight into the topic for today's video. To understand how we have the power to shift our reality, we first need to understand a three-step process. Now, I've created a little diagram here. You'll have to forgive my drawing, but hopefully this will do the job. So we need to understand a three-step process. So hopefully from my diagram here, you can see that there are three key layers. So we have pure awareness at the top, we then have identity in the middle, and finally at the bottom we have reality. So we'll start here at the bottom with reality because that is where most people tend to focus. So what I mean by reality here, which hopefully you can tell that's supposed to be a little house, this is basically supposed to represent our physical reality, your external reality, so your life circumstances, everything that you are experiencing in life. Now, when most people want to change their reality, this is where they start. They try to control their circumstances, they try and put loads of hard work in, they do a lot of pushing, and they really just try and manipulate their circumstances. That is how they try and see change in their reality. So if you want to make more money, for example, then this would look like doing loads of extra hours at work, maybe doing loads of research or trying to find ways to make passive income outside of work. All of these ways, these physical actions that you are doing to try and change your circumstances. Maybe you want a relationship, so you're going on all the dating apps, you're going on lots of dates, you're putting yourself out there and talking to loads of people. So again, there's something in your reality that you're trying to change or attract, and the way you're doing it is through physical actions, through trying to change the external circumstances. And I just want to note here, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do these things. Of course you need to physically work towards your goals, but what we have to understand, and what we're going to understand through this process, is that that is not the most powerful way to cause a shift in your life. But before we explore why that is the case, I just want to talk about another important thing that tends to happen at this level of the process with our external physical reality, and that is that most people use their external reality to define themselves. So this brings us up to the middle part of the diagram, the identity diagram. Most people look to their outer environment and their external reality to define themselves. They use their external circumstances to confirm to them who they believe they are. So for example, let's say you did really well on an exam at school and you got a really good grade. They will use that as evidence to confirm to themselves that they are smart, that they are intelligent. Or another example is maybe someone shows an interest in you and you use that as reason to confirm to yourself that you are lovable, that you are worthy. And of course the opposite is true too. If you have someone who doesn't show interest in you, then you use that to confirm to yourself that you are unworthy. So it can be a positive or a negative thing. But what happens in life is most people look to their external circumstances, whatever they may be, and use those circumstances to define themselves. So in this sense, we can look at this process and see it as going backwards from reality to identity. People are using their reality to define their identity. So this brings us to the middle part of the diagram, which is identity. So you might notice here that we're kind of moving backwards in this process. We're going from reality to identity because most people use their reality to define their identity. So let's explore this for a minute. What is identity? Your identity is who you believe you are. It's the beliefs you have about yourself and the beliefs you have about your relation to the world around you. So if I asked you, for example, who are you? The answer you'd likely give me is I am, and then a list of all of these things that relate to your external circumstances. So you might say, my name is so-and-so. I do this particular job for a living. I am this person's sister. I am this person's partner. I have a degree in this particular topic. I live in this place. all of these things that you are going to list about yourself to try and define who you are, to define your identity, these are all external things. So most people get stuck in this trap of these two levels of the process. They look to their external reality to define their identity. And so if they want to feel different and they want to experience something different, because they see their external reality as the causal mechanism of their identity, even if unconsciously, then when they want to feel different, they look to change their external reality because that is seen as the cause. And so this is why when people want to shift their lives, they start focusing on their external circumstances. They start trying to control and to manipulate their physical reality. And that's why they have to put in all of this hard work and do all of this pushing. So they get stuck in this loop and they never even realize there is this further level of pure awareness. So if you want to experience true change in your life, change that feels effortless, what we need to do is reverse this process. We need to understand that your reality is not the cause of your identity. Instead, your identity is the cause of your external reality. Now, before we get onto the top half of the diagram, let me just explain a little bit about why your identity is the cause of your reality. So you'll see I have an arrow here pointing down towards the reality section, and on either side of the arrow I have the words internal and external. Now, these two words represent to me the two different ways that I believe we create and manifest our reality, and so they explain why our identity is the root cause of our external reality. So let me just explain them for a second. So first we have internal. Now what this refers to is the fact that our internal state shapes our experience of reality, even if our external reality doesn't necessarily change. So what I mean by this is our brain essentially works like a radio, and this is a scientific concept, by the way. There's many different scientific things that back this up. This isn't just a manifestation concept, but basically our brain works like a radio, just like how you can tune a radio to a particular frequency, which tunes it into a particular radio station. Your brain essentially works the same way. You can tune your brain to a certain reality, and this works through various mechanisms such as the Reticular Activating System and confirmation bias. Basically, these different mechanisms in your brain or different processes in your mind that cause your brain to filter reality in a certain way. Our brain basically can't process all of the signals we receive all of the time because we're constantly receiving so many signals from our outer environment, so it has to filter them and choose what enters our conscious awareness. But the beauty is, we have the power to choose what we allow to reach our conscious awareness. We can harness this process, and what it comes down to is what we focus on and pay attention to the most. Whatever we spend most of our time focusing on and thinking about is what our brain and mind deem important, and as a result, that's what they filter into our conscious awareness. But it also comes down to our beliefs. Whatever we believe, our mind will serve as evidence of. So if we believe that we are abundant, for example, then our mind is going to filter in evidence to show us that. So in that way, we are creating our experience of reality. Whatever we perceive is a direct result of our beliefs and what we pay attention to, and so this shapes our experience of reality. So now let's look at the external part. So this is the other way that we create our reality, and what this aspect refers to is the actual tangible effects that our identity and our mind can have on our physical environment. So the first way this happens is through the placebo effect. I'm sure you are familiar with the placebo effect, but what it essentially is when we have certain beliefs, and these activate actual physiological processes in our body. So if we have beliefs of healing, for example, then we can actually activate healing within our body. So in that way, our mind and our beliefs are activating physical effects. But it might also go further than this. Quantum physics has some incredibly interesting experiments, and what these experiments essentially show is that quantum particles behave differently in different circumstances, and one of the interpretations of quantum physics is that maybe it has something to do with consciousness and awareness that is causing the difference in the particles' behavior. If this is true, then it means your mind doesn't only have powerful physical effects in the body, it might also have effects that stem beyond the body and can actually reach into your outer environment. If you want to learn more about the quantum physics aspect of this because it is incredibly interesting, then I'll link a video up here. But the key thing to note here about both of these ways that we create our reality, both the internal and the external, is that they all hinge on our identity. Essentially what we believe about ourselves and believe about ourselves in relation to the world around us. So if you want to shift your reality, you need to shift your identity. It's no good focusing all of your efforts on just trying to control your external reality. Now, to understand the power you have in shifting your identity, this is where we come to the top part of this diagram, pure awareness. So we already talked about your identity and how your identity is largely related to all of your external circumstances. You use things like your achievements and your relations to other people to define who you are. Now, the thing we have to understand about this is that all of these different things that we use to define ourselves aren't who we truly are. All of these different things, whether it's your job or a degree that you earned, or even certain family members that you obviously have a relation to, all of these things are things that we can observe, and so that in and of itself should tell us that we are not those things. But we also need to realize that in the absence of those things, we would still persist. So again, this tells us that we are not those things. Those things are not who we truly are. And we can take this even deeper. Even your physical body, that's another thing we tend to identify with. Again, that is not who we truly are. If you think about this for a second and think about yourself looking in the mirror at all of these different points in your life. If you look in the mirror now, you're going to see someone completely different than you saw 10 years ago or even a year ago. So that tells you that even your physical body isn't who you are. It changes, and yet you still persist. The only single thing that persists, despite all of these external things that we identify with, is your awareness. What you truly are is pure awareness. That is the only thing that stays when all of these other external things change. Now, this is crucial to understand, because when you understand this, that you are truly pure awareness and your identity is not who you truly are, then you realize that your identity is simply a set of conditions that you have adopted. And as a result, it's something that can be changed. Nothing you identify with in your external reality, including your physical body, is who you truly are. So you can choose to identify as whatever you want. So if your identity is completely malleable and doesn't say anything about who you are at your core, then you may as well choose an identity that aligns with the reality that you want to experience. An identity that is going to serve you in manifesting your dreams. So if you are trying to shift your reality, then you need to start embodying the person who has that reality. It doesn't matter that your external reality doesn't already show that, because as we've already been through, your external reality is a result of your identity. There's a delay between them. The identity comes first and the external reality comes second. It's a reflection. So you need to identify as the person who has your dream reality first, and then eventually, if you persist with that, your external reality is going to change to match that. But it all starts with your identity. So if you want to experience more abundance in life, you need to identify as someone who is abundant. Focus on all the things in your life that represent abundance, all the things you already have, and focus on the wealth circulating around you. If you are someone who wants to attract a new relationship, then don't just focus on going on all of the dating sites and going on all of the dates. What you also need to do is identify as someone who is worthy of receiving that love. Give that love to yourself so that you embody it and you are emitting that frequency. If you want to be a successful business owner, it doesn't matter that you don't have that business yet. You can still identify as a successful business owner already while you're doing the work towards it. But if you don't embody that identity first, then any of the examples I've just listed or anything else that you can think of, it doesn't matter how much work you put towards it. You might even get whatever you want through that hard work, but if you don't identify with it, then whatever you achieve isn't going to be stable. If you want results that come to you in a much more effortless way, and which also are going to stay because they're going to be stable, then you need to identify as the person who already has those results. So hopefully through this 3-step process, you can understand now that if you want to shift your reality, you need to stop focusing on your external reality and trying to control the circumstances. You need to move backwards and focus on your identity instead. You ultimately are pure awareness, so you can choose whatever identity you want. So you may as well choose one that is going to serve your dream reality. Now, if you want help shifting into a new identity so that you can start changing your reality with ease, then you can watch this video here in which I teach you how to reprogram your mind. If, on the other hand, you want to go even deeper into how we create our reality, then you can watch this video here in which I go really deep into the quantum physics and explain how our consciousness might be able to exert a physical influence on reality at the quantum level. For now, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you gained some value from it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you in the next video.